Friends, I want to talk to you about Donald Trump and why I think he's not a Republican. That's right. I know he runs on the Republican platform and therefore he's elected as a Republican, but I think that's a necessity of the American political system. I want to take the next 10 minutes or so to analyze 5 areas that will hopefully demonstrate to you that he's not a Republican, certainly not in the sense of what the Republican Party has been historically known for. So I've got a few notes here that I've drafted in preparation for this, so hopefully you wouldn't mind me referring to those as we speak. But there are 5 areas, beginning with free trade as the first one. So what's the traditional sort of Republican GOP position on free trade, right? They belong to the free market economy, capitalist mindset. And again, this is not whether I like it or whether I agree with it or not, or whether you agree with it, but this is what the Republican position consistently has been, which is of global expansionism, making alliances. They obviously created, the partnerships, whether it was the TPP, the NAFTA, the WTO. They have a leading role to play in the IMF. Republicans, in fact, made sure that China came back to the international fold after it became a communist country. And if you think about what Trump's been doing, he's the polar opposite, right? He's been withdrawing from many of these pacts, or at least modifying them. In the case of NAFTA, he thinks of deficits as a weakness, even though that's not traditionally the free market economics position. He believes that we should be just going it alone, and that if we, in quotes, depend on others to do stuff, that's a sign of American weakness. This is a massive departure from the sort of free market traditional Republican position. The second area I want to talk to you about is his role in undermining the American institutions. This one's particularly important and close to my heart, because the Republican Party is the party that's really built the American institutions, whether it's the idea of the Constitution, whether it's the sort of 3 pillars of government, the separation of judiciary, the very powerful sort of state-centric setup versus the federal setup that exists in many other countries. Trump has been totally undermining all sorts of institutions. I'll give you a couple of examples. Firstly, you can think of the electoral process itself. So what's his position? His position is that if I win, I win in spite of the system not working. And if I lose, of course, the system was rigged against me. The same concept and same logic or lack of applies to his thinking about the judiciary. So, he routinely names and verbally ridicules justices who hold opinions that are contrary to his position. He's actually called certain judges, I think he's called one guy a Mexican for the sin of being just a Latino American. He fired the FBI director, as some of you might remember, Comey. He's put his own guy there. He also appointed his own sort of person on the conservative Supreme Court bench, who then ensured that Roe versus Wade was overturned. So very politically motivated sort of appointment. But in all, I don't think he cares about any institutional norms or decorum or anything like that. And it's my way or the highway, which is deeply troubling, because I think America's strength historically has been based on its ability to build long-lasting institutions which do the job irrespective of who's in power. And I think Trump is totally undermining what I would say was a great achievement of the US in the last 200 years or so. Thirdly, this idea of fiscal conservatism. So again, the traditional Republican position has always been one of being very prudent, trying to balance budgets, to curtail government overreach. They've regularly criticized the Democrats for essentially just taxing and spending. And debt is a word that's been used very often in the past, as has Trump been using it. But did you know that Trump has actually overseen the largest debt increase in American history? In his first term, he, I think, added $37.9 trillion to the US debt, partially on account of some COVID-related spending, which of course has also led to all sorts of crises in global markets, because all that we see today on the inflationary front is a direct result of that. But also he cut taxes without actually cutting spending to a commensurate degree. So that led to an increase in deficits. And I remember when he was debating with Biden during his second attempt at the presidency, he kept talking about the economy, and he kept talking about the fact that the deficit's sky high, etc. And his latest bill, which is this one of the tax legislations that's caused the split with Elon Musk in the recent weeks. The latest bill also adds only more, I think around $2 trillion more to the government debt, and there's nothing to actually bring it under control. So this idea of fiscal conservatism, which is a very Republican idea, has gone totally out of the window. Donald Trump doesn't care about it. I don't think he actually understands anything to do with economics anyway. Plus, his ego is such that he wouldn't listen to the people around him who do understand. But what we can definitely say is that he's totally not in line with the traditional Republican position of being fiscally conservative. The fourth area is, and I kind of touched on this when I was just introducing the topic, is the role that allies play in the American influence globally. So traditionally, Republicans have been hawks, if you want to put them that way. They have always loved to be involved in everything, whether it's economic alliances like the WTO, IMF, and the partnerships that I mentioned, or NATO alliances such as military alliances, I meant to say, such as NATO. Or recently there's been an alliance called the Quad with India, Japan, and Australia, and there's a nuclear deal now with or the Five Eyes system, which is the intelligence sharing network across the English-speaking world. So that's the Republican position. And if you think about what Trump's been doing, he's been routinely degrading the quality of these institutions. He's been berating the leaders who run these. He's been challenging, he's been basically saying to Europe, you go and fend for yourself. You remember when the Ukrainian president came to the White House recently, he insulted him and said that, you're not in a position to tell us what to do. Well, it is because of NATO promises that Ukraine was already in the position that it finds itself in. And then Trump, instead of obviously trying to continue, as any other Republican would have, with the sort of NATO pro-Ukraine position, started haggling with him. And his support for all sorts of outcasts like, I don't know, Kim Jong-un, he's admired Putin. I think recently he took a picture with the new Syrian president, who I think is still a designated terrorist, a UN designated terrorist, that too. It just does not, these things don't marry well. And so Trump's sort of global strategy, if you want to call it that, or the lack of, is totally at odds with the traditional Republican position of seeing America as a global influence for the good, and creating both military as well as economic alliances to sort of foster its own agenda. And then lastly, the one area that Republicans always claim to lead the way was this sort of personal conduct. So I talked about moral conservatism. You can also think of it as, I talked about fiscal conservatism. You can think of this part as moral conservatism, which is the idea that you should be humble, and that your conduct, your language, your way of life should be, if you want, rooted in sort of some sort of Christian ideal, whatever that might be. But you think of Trump and you think of all the scandals he's been involved in. Firstly, he's been married thrice. I don't know how many children he's got. I think at least the ones who are known to us are maybe 7 or 8 of them from memory. And he's been convicted in the Stormy Daniels case. Essentially, he slept with a porn star, paid money, and fudged his tax accounts to hide where that money was actually going. And so this is a serious offense in the U.S. He's been caught on camera saying very crass things about others, in particular about women. So it's his behavior. I mean, I don't think it behooves any sort of decent human being, but certainly not a sort of Republican president in the traditional sense, who would have been known for, or who have been historically known to be at least far more conservative in how they speak and maintain a certain elegance and decorum, and consider themselves at least to be deeply rooted in the Christian tradition, and demonstrate behavior in line with their sort of theological leanings. So Here are like five, I can go on, but these are like five areas where I feel there are very specific examples that what Trump does and how he thinks about the world and his own conduct has got really nothing to do with the Republicans, at least as they were traditionally known to be. Now, one can argue that, hey, this is, Avi, the new Republican Party. But if this is the new Republican Party, then one must ask the question, what happens to this party post-Trump? Because rightly or wrongly, the Trump phenomena, the Trump cult, somehow continues to attract voters, just about, I'd say. But what happens after he finishes his second term? Of course, he doesn't want to. I'm sure he's going to come up with a way to try and become president for the third time or for life. But assuming that doesn't happen, how do we reconcile these two things? And that's a tough question for the Republicans to answer. I actually think there should be more Republicans challenging Trump and saving the conservative platform from the sort of erosion that I'm seeing on all these different parameters, ranging from the economic to the sort of personal conduct. And if they fail to do this, I actually see a very bleak future for the Republican Party.